What's up? What's up? This is The Drop. I'm here with ASHANTI, Miranda. I'm Angel Robinson. So let's talk. So she's gonna tell us. Yeah, she's gonna tell us some things about real estate and sort of a little bit about lending, right?
A little bit. I'm gonna touch on it just a little bit. Yes.
So tell me, how did you get into real estate?
So it was about probably 15 years ago. I was interested. The person I was in a relationship at the time was into fix and flips, and I thought to myself, well, I'd like to get on the other side of it. You know, the acquisition, buying, and selling. So I took the class 2 times, and then I took it for the 3rd time 3 years ago, and made sure I studied, got my license, and the rest is history.
Is the exam a hard exam, or you just need to study a lot?
You need to study. I don't know. I was really nervous because I met people that said they took it 7 times and failed.
Yeah.
I passed, and I was the first one done, so I was shocked.
Oh, wow.
But I studied for about 3 weeks every day, probably an hour or so every day at work. On my lunch break.
Okay.
On a lunch break. And that was it. And so it depends. I think if you study and you know the material, I think you'll be good to go.
And you're licensed in the state of Massachusetts.
In the state of Massachusetts, it's about to be in the state of Rhode Island as well, because it's neighboring and it's super close to where I live.
Good.
So yeah.
Good. That's nice. So tell us, what school did you go to?
I went to professional real estate training. It's in Randolph, and it's amazing. Yeah. It's an amazing school. Instructor's amazing. Yeah. It's really affordable in terms if you look for pricing anywhere else, you're looking $350 to $500. Yeah. This was, I think, $185 if you signed up online, including your books. Nice. And then they give you this thing's called night before the exam. That was my saving grace for studying. That's all I used for studying, and I passed it first time. So it was awesome.
Nice. Because I have a friend that didn't pass, and he has to take it again.
Really?
In Maryland.
Oh, okay. So it's a little different. So you have kind of a nationwide test, so that is the same basic questions, or not all the same questions, but the same information and material. Yeah. And then you have state exams. Yeah. So there's like a Massachusetts piece, and then there's kind of a national piece.
Okay. So have you
do both?
Both?
Yeah, you have to do both. But what I'm saying is, so the variations are within the state regulations as opposed to the national regulations. So.
Okay, good. So let's get into it.
Okay.
Okay. If you're an entrepreneur and you wanted to get into buying houses and flipping houses, tell me about that.
Okay, so that's another, with real estate, I have to say, it's all layered answers to these questions. For flipping, you really need to work with people that are doing it actively. A lot of times, myself included, you go into a property, for example, and you say, there's 20 acres of land, I'm just going to divide this up and make 20 houses, and it's not that simple. There's different bylaws and different things you need to find out about frontage requirements and parking and all of these different things that you really need to work with a developer, for a bigger project. If you're looking at just a single family or 2 or 3 family, you really need to be working with people that know what they're doing, a realtor that knows what they're doing in terms of knowing the area, knowing what the property will be worth after you fix it up. And also contractors and things of that nature. So funding, there's a bunch that goes into it, and so my suggestion is always speak with a lender, speak with a realtor, for sure. That's how you get started.
And you said about contractors. Tell me about contractors, because a lot of people say they have that's one of the hardest parts, dealing with contractors.
Absolutely, 100%. So I am fortunate enough that I have found some really great contractors, but it's difficult. Sometimes they don't show up for jobs, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. I don't know if maybe contractors bite off more than they can chew and take on all these jobs, because I don't understand. These are sometimes sizable jobs. Like I was telling you earlier, my 2 sons are buying a property, and this is a $140,000 job, and I have people not showing up, and I don't understand that. So. But it is hard to find that. So once you do find a contractor, hang on to them,
and
stick with that team. Absolutely, because they need to be trustworthy, they need to be reliable. And once you find that in any contractor and anybody that you're working with in any area of business, hang on to them, because it's hard to find.
And how do you deal with the payment for contractors? Because some people say you should give them 25%. Some people say 50%. or some people say 25, 25, 25, and 25 to balance them to make sure that they show up?
It depends. So I have a contract I'm working with right now, and the contract that he had sent out to us, it's 33% up front, 33% midway, and so they've outlined what they're requiring for work, what they're requiring for payment, I'm sorry. So it really depends. And you're also talking about what type of funding you have. So if you are going with a 203K loan, that is governed by that lender and that program, so they'll determine how the payments are distributed. And so you have to be really careful and to make sure the contractor understands that. If you're dealing with hard money, you're talking about draws and when do they get that funding. So it really is, there's no one way, there's no one answer like, oh, this is how it goes. But if you're dealing with personal finance, if you have $100,000 in the bank, I would say, 30, or, 40 or whatever, 33, 33.
Okay. So can you explain a little bit about 203K?
203K,
the loan,
it's my favorite.
Yeah,
so there's two types of FHA loans. It's a standard loan, and then there is the 203K, which is a rehab loan. And so typically, you have a house that you want to go with a standard loan. There's certain things, and again, I'm not a lender, so I'm just going to give a high level. I don't know all the ins and outs 100%, but so they're looking for basic things. I know railings on the stairs, no peeling paint on not only the house, but if there's a garage or anything like that. Floor, rotting carpet, things like that. Anything that makes a house uninhabitable. The FHA loan would not fund that. Now what you can do now is go to 203K, and that's a part of the FHA loan. So it's a 203K FHA 203K. So that they come in and they say, okay, in order to make this house habitable, we need to apply 2 railings. We need to fix a hole in the roof, and so you kind of combine that. So if you qualify for $200,000, and we find you a house that's $170,000 but needs a new roof and needs new plumbing, we might not make it. But if it just needs a new roof, that's $15,000 to $20,000, and we get the house for $170,000, that's $190,000. You still stay under that $200,000. So it's not in addition to what you're qualified for. What you're qualified for needs to cover the acquisition and the repair of the house.
Good.
So
that's a good explanation. You know what you're talking about. So
I love it. It's my favorite.
Well, talk about the credit score. Where should your credit score be? Or what range?
So, shockingly, a lot of people come up to me. I met a woman about a month ago, and she couldn't believe. She said, "Oh, my credit needs work. I'm not sure if I can buy a house." And then she told me it was 725, and I was like, "You're good. Like, let's go. We can buy a house today." But generally, you want to be at 580. And again, this is going to change what you qualify for, your interest rate and things of that nature. But you can go as low as 580 depending on the product and depending on the program. For veterans, you can go as low as 540. So again, there are so many different variables that the lender is looking at in terms of what you would be approved for and being approved in general. So the score is one piece of the credit. They're also looking at other things. You can have a 720 credit score, but you can have collections from 2 years ago or something, and a lender's going to want that paid. So even though you have the credit score, they're going to want those things paid. So again, there's a ton of different variables that go into it, and like we had discussed before, hopefully we can get a lender on the show that can really dive deep into the lending piece of buying a house.
Certainly. All right. Talk about rental property. You want to buy property to rent. Talk about a little bit about that.
So I'll give a personal opinion. I would say if you want to be a landlord, Massachusetts is heavy on the protection of the rights of tenants, and I'm all for it. But landlords do need to be careful and understand, and also protect themselves, because there are tenants who sometimes can take advantage of that, and vice versa. So I think being a landlord is great. I think it's lucrative. The more property you own, the more money you make. And so when it comes to acquiring a property, if I can, when I'm speaking with someone buying their first home, I always suggest at least entertaining the thought of looking into a 2 or 3 family. And the reason being, you're jumping from having to pay rent to having to pay a mortgage. This is your credit. This is your property. This is your life. And so if you can jump into a 2 or 3 family and you're not afraid of being that landlord, that can really help offset the cost of paying that mortgage. If you want to get into multiple properties, understand the laws, understand the rules, and know, kind of, you know, again, it's all about getting in with the right realtor. There are landlord association and groups all over the state. There's one in New Bedford, which is where I grew up. It's like $100 for the year, and it's totally worth it because they are always talking about different laws and rules that are coming out to help landlords, to kind of look out for the landlord. So
good. I hear people say that they usually buy places and do Section 8 and stuff like that. What do you think about that?
So I meet people, and I've met people, and I definitely wouldn't put any names out there who don't want to rent to Section 8. I think Section 8 is a great program. It's helping families that can't, you know, hardworking families that can't afford it. Things are expensive. You know, they have a couple of kids or what have you, or they're taking care of foster kids or whatever the case may be. And I think it's an amazing program. And I think as a landlord, I personally don't understand. I've owned rental property in the past. I don't understand why they're not interested. I think it might just be the stigma of like it's government aid or things of that nature, and that's fine. That's their opinion, but it's guaranteed money. Let's just be honest. You know, on the first of the month or the second, if it's a holiday or a Sunday, you're going to get a check every single month. And sure, the tenant is responsible for their portion, but in my experience, yes, there are those people that don't pay, but most of the time, they want to protect that certificate and make sure they maintain that, and they know they risk losing it if they don't pay their portion of their rent. So my experience has been great with Section 8. And I suggest anybody that, you know, make sure your apartments are up to code. If you're buying property, especially in Massachusetts, we have a lot of older homes. If you can afford it, de-let it. There are a lot of programs out there. I can't speak to them in detail because I don't know, you know, speak to your state to your city legislation. They'll know the programs that are out there that can help offset the cost of the de-letting. It's definitely worth it.
Good, because some people have a misunderstanding about people on Section 8.
They absolutely do.
You know, they think everyone on Section 8 are horrible people,
and it's not true.
Exactly. I grew up in the ghettos of the Bronx, and I tell people most of the people in the Bronx work, and that's what people don't understand. That's what people don't understand. Listen, the rent in New Bedford, for example, and excuse if I speak to New Bedford a lot. That's where I grew up. I don't live there, but that's kind of the area that I'm comfortable, that I know really well, and you know. 3 or 4 years ago, you could get a 3-bedroom for $800-900. Now it's $1,200. When you're talking, it's gone up 30%. People can't afford that, and people are still making $12 an hour or $14 an hour. It's just not affordable. You know, my son, he started construction about 2 years ago. You know, so he was 19 years old, and he was making $22 an hour living at home, and really realized like, wow, life is expensive. That's $22 an hour. A single child living with his parents and still saw the struggle of making car payments. So no, that misconception of Section 8 people, you know, I don't even want to say people, recipients of Section 8, you know, not being good people or good tenants is just false. There are just as many poor tenants that pay their own rent as there are Section 8 tenants, you know. And I have friends that are nurses and
absolutely,
you know, construction people,
hardworking people,
and
exactly.
Lose that stigma about
please.
Please let that go.
Please.
You know. So can you explain certain versions of loans, different loans?
So there are so many different products out there. You have the VA loan, and you have the FHA, which I explained, in 203K. There is a conventional loan. You have Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. There are so many different loans out there, and there are products even for people that have great credit that require even you know less than 3% down. So really, depending on your credit and your financial situation, that will dictate what type of loan you qualify for. And for that, I say there are literally dozens of products out there. So when we bring a lender back on, you know, we can kind of structure those questions for him or her, and they can answer that, and then hopefully there's some interaction and people can ask, you know, about their specific situation, and then the lender would know, hey, this would be the perfect product for you.
Let's make that happen soon.
Yes, absolutely. I have 3 people ready to go.
So if you tell us what is a good down payment for a house. What percentage?
So again, that depends. So typically you want to plan to have 3 to 5% down, depending on the product you have. Again, there are products that require less of a down payment. However, if you're investing in a commercial property, you're looking at 25% down. And commercial can be four family and up. So it doesn't have to be, a business. Commercial is anything that's above a 3 family. So if you want to invest in, if you want to invest in a 4 family, that would be that, you're moving into commercial territory, or 5 family, I should say 5 family. So now you're looking at 25% down because it's considered an investment property. So again, it depends on your situation. You also have to consider private mortgage insurance, and I can't speak to the nitty gritty on this, but if you only have a certain percent down and it's a lower percentage, and depending on your credit, lenders are looking for private mortgage insurance, and basically that's them insuring your mortgage, saying, hey, if this person doesn't pay, we're going to cover, just like insurance for a loss or any other, that it would cover that loss. And PMI, or private mortgage insurance, can be very, very expensive. I mean, you're talking, it can be $500-$600 a month. So it can make a huge difference. You have someone run the numbers and it's like, hey, I bought a house for $200,000 and my mortgage payment's going to be $1,400. Slap on that $500 PMI payment, and now you're looking at almost a $2,000 $2,000 a month payment. So if you can come up with more of a down payment, I say do it. But again, this all depends on the mortgage product that each individual would be applying for.
Okay. So let's see. Get into the next question. All right. You told us about fixer-uppers, right? We know about the 3% down for the loans. You told us about different versions of the loans. It's numbers making sense. Can you talk to that point of stuff when numbers are making sense for someone who wants to buy a house? How do they,
What do you mean? Give me.
Making sense of, if a person is making $30,000 a year, what number makes sense for them to buy a house?
So again, that would be a lender question, but I would say, and I really honestly, that's something we typically, even a lender is going to punch into some sort of software, if you will, and punch that in. But if you're making $30,000 a year, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult, not impossible. But this is my personal opinion. And I say this to my friends and family. And so this is just personal. You don't have to, take this to the bank. Buy something. If you have to go in on a deal with your cousin, if you have to go on a deal with your aunt, if you have to go on a deal with your brother, your sister, and they're reliable, do it. Because right now, all I'm seeing, especially, from where I'm at, is the prices are going up and up and up. And then, we're going to introduce gentrification. We're going to have people that can't afford to live in places, and they're just going to continue to be displaced. I've seen it happen in parts of Boston and outskirts of Boston, and I would hate to see that happen to other, my neighbors and people and my friends. So if you don't feel that you can afford to buy a house, team up with someone.
And that's important because I see a lot of people even on the Cape, they team up with their family members, buy a house, and they and other people move in, they buy a house and it moves, and they keep buying houses.
Stop renting, stop paying somebody else's mortgage, invest in yourself. And before I really got into real estate, it sounds so cliche and cheesy. You don't even have to use me as a realtor. Find somebody else, but buy something.
No, you're supposed to say use me as your realtor.
I want them to. I think I am the best because I love everyone and I love people. However, what I'm saying is, I make this statement not because I want to do business. I make this statement because I really care about people. And you have to buy something, because if you don't, somebody else will, and then you're going to be paying their mortgage, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
All right. Hey,
I'm passionate about that.
Mellow Yellow said, Mellow Yellow, are you coming on? Mellow Yellow just entered the building. She just coming from her work. So we'll allow Mellow Yellow to come in. The registered nurse, she has on her her whole setup.
Bright, fun.
Don't walk in front of the camera. Walk behind the camera.
Oops.
Is she on mute? Is Mellow Yellow on mute?
Hello.
Ashanti, this is Danielle.
Hi.
We call her name is
nice to meet you.
Mellow Yellow on the show. Her name is Mellow Yellow. Put it on this side. Tuck it under, please. Yeah. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I gave them to you.
Oh, okay.
Did you talk about first-time home buyer program?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
So, but we have to wait until she gets you on. Is Danielle on? Danielle is on.
What's up? I'm on.
So, your question?
All right. You just put me
First
on
time
spot,
home
but
buyer.
yes,
Okay.
First time
So
home buyer. How
there,
does that work? And how can someone get into a
so
class?
so there are different programs out there. Some, if they're kind of tied into the city or county that you're from, you have to go through like a class. There's like a 10-hour class, things of that nature, and they'll help with there's down payment assistance. So if you know the prospective buyer needs that assistance with down payment and things of that nature, then I would suggest going to your local community, you know, the city hall or something. They usually, or economic development person, and they will know, they'll kind of point you in the right direction. For New Bedford, I have contact for that, but for this area, I don't know who the contact person would be, but I would start with City Hall, whatever their town hall or City Hall.
I know we have two, one in Orleans and one in Hyannis.
Okay.
Called HAC.
Yeah, the Housing Authority.
Corporation.
And so
something like that.
But one before you go on, can you use that? Only use it in the town that that's in, or can you use it in
Anywhere.
New Bedford? If you get a certificate for $10,000 or 20, whatever they give.
So it's not. So the certificate just says basically you've taken this class, and now you qualify to work with their lenders with down payment assistance and so on. In terms of moving, I'd have to be 100%. I don't know. I don't know if that would just be utilized for the town or community that you're in, or if it's a Massachusetts thing. But I do, like I said, I do know that would be where you would qualify for the down payment assistance, as opposed to, you know, you have first-time home buyer programs where you don't have to take a class at all, and so it really depends on what your needs are.
But the class is what you get, where you get that
You get a
money.
certificate. You get a certificate, and you can look to the
lenders
down.
and everyone come to that.
And
Do you
everyone,
know how they determine who gets how much?
that would be based on your income. So it's still going to be
Okay.
income based. So if, you know, let's say if you're making $50,000 a year, and based on your expenses and all that, and you qualify, and these are, again, just random numbers. I don't know what people qualify for, because
Right.
that's not what I do. But let's say you qualify for $250,000. They would then determine what you would qualify for down payment assistance and things of that nature based on what you qualified for a loan. So it all depends on the person. It's very individualized.
Okay.
Good. So how do agents get paid?
Meaning, like, how do we make money?
Yeah, exactly.
So
people want to know that, right?
Absolutely. So the seller typically is who pays the agent's commission. So my advice to all buyers: get an agent. It doesn't cost you a penny. It doesn't cost you anything. And think of it this way: you know, if I'm selling your house in Hyannis, and you're the buyer, and you come in, I'm gonna look out for Angel's needs, right? And I'm not really going to, I mean, hopefully I'm an honest, decent person, and I'm going to make sure we're not doing anything shady, but my focus is you. Right. You need someone that's going to advocate for you and say, hey, wait a minute, you know, I get that he wants $250,000 for the house, but the roof hasn't been done in, you know, it was done 27 years ago. Odds are in 2 or 3 years we're going to need a new roof. I think we should come down $10,000. I'm not going to say that to you. I'm not going to say, hey, tell Angel you're going to pay $10,000 less, but your realtor will do their research and do that for you. So my first suggestion: buyers, get a realtor. It doesn't cost you a penny. And be committed to your realtor. You know, it behooves you to be committed to one realtor. Working with a bunch of different people, it just doesn't benefit anyone. In terms of seller, the seller usually pays a commission, usually 5 to 6%. In some areas, it can be lower. In New Bedford, it hovers around 4%. And so that is usually how it's split between the buyer. So again, if I'm representing you and I'm selling your house, and then you have an agent that's representing you, we would then split the commission. So I would split the commission from the sale with the buyer's agent. So that's how both parties are paid.
Okay. All right, see? Never knew that. So finding out information.
Yes, so like I said, the buyer agent to me is very, very important. I see a lot of people, you know, even sellers try to sell property on their own, and it's fine, but I want to say the numbers are like 93 or 97% of sellers that try to sell on their own end up going with an agent. So you spend 3 to 4 months trying to sell it on your own. It's not to say that they're not capable of doing it, but this is what most of us do for a living, as opposed to you, who's a nurse and tired, and, you know, do you have time to go and market your property the way we do and spend the money that we spend on marketing? No. So why not let someone do it? If you're gonna, you know, sell something for $300,000, pay that commission and not have that on your plate. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, makes sense.
So
can you explain closing costs to us?
So closing costs are different for the buyer and the seller. So the seller, will pay like their attorney fee. They'll pay tax stamps. I want to say I think $4.56 on $1,000 or in Massachusetts. They'll pay the title fees and things of that nature, and then buyers will have different closing costs. They'll have an attorney fee as well. Again, you don't have to have an attorney, and it's something that I strongly recommend for the same reason. You know, your attorney is going to look out for your best interests, and then you also have the buyer who will have, there'll be a bank attorney, but you have to understand that bank attorney is looking at what's best for the bank. They want to say, hey, all these numbers add up. This bank is going to be protected. Cool. The buyer's attorney is going to look at the purchase and sale, every line of it, and make sure I'm using you guys as buyer and seller example. They're going to say like, hey, I want to make sure you're protected and make sure that you know that your needs are filled. So, so it's a little different for buyer and seller. And then there's also another thing that a lot of people sometimes don't think about, which are prepaids, especially for the buyer. So prepaids can, it can bump up your closing costs $400 or $500, sometimes even more. So example, and this is, again, I feel that this is a void in the industry where a lot of people don't talk about it, and then it's like, oh yeah, it's another $1,500 because let's say you're selling your house and you filled your oil tank, in September, and spent $700 filling your tank, and then we sell in October. Well, now you spent $700, so now the buyer needs to pay you for that. That could be $500 or $450. You've paid, insurance for the whole year. Let's say we got to pay you back for that because, we close October 15th, you paid your mortgage October 1st. Well, we need to pay you for that 16 days of the mortgage. So those are prepaids and those are pretty much costs that the seller has incurred that need to be kind of paid back from the buyer. And again, as you can see, just with a couple of examples, that can, we're saying, hey, to the closing table, we need another $1,200. That's significant, for the average person, $1,200 is significant. So it's another thing to be mindful of when buying a house, not just closing costs, but prepaids.
Good. Can you tell us something about foreclosures? Buying a foreclosure.
So buying
and short sales after
Sure.
that, please.
So foreclosure, for people that don't know, it's just when the bank takes back the property. Essentially, the owner could no longer make payments on the mortgage, and so the bank says, hey, we're taking it back. And the process can be long. I do say I'm actually working with a couple now, and I do say for anyone that has that time on their hands, if you can wait and you're not in a rush, let's go for it. But it can be time consuming, and there are different, so the bank kind of is the one that makes the decision. You can either have auctions, so on like a Hubzu or auction.com. From my understanding, auction.com, they don't use realtors, so you're kind of going in it yourself as a buyer. So I don't want to say buyer beware. It sounds kind of, but I would say that just be careful. Be wise. Incorporate assistance from other people if you can. And then you have Hubzu, which they do incorporate the assistance of realtors, which I think makes it a little smoother. Then you can go on MLS. I could go on and find auction properties where you'll actually go and have like an outside auction where people will stand outside and bid on the property. And then you have bank-owned property that they actually just list it, and they come up with a price. They work with a local realtor, so let's say it's in Dennisport, and they have a house, I don't know this area, but on Main Street, and they'll say, hey, we want $180,000 for it, and they'll actually list it with a realtor, and it's very similar to a regular purchase, a regular listing. With foreclosures, though, it can be a process, again, because you're waiting for bank approval and they're backlogged, so sometimes you might not get the responses. If I put an offer in for you guys, say you're buying a house, I'm going to say, okay, if I put it in tonight, I want an answer by tomorrow at this time, 24 hours, maybe 36 hours, depending on the time and the circumstance. With bank-owned, you're not putting that because it might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month before you even get a response. So it's a little different, and again, depending on the circumstance. Not all banks, but with some situations. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different variables that go into it. So it is something I say, be prepared, for this to be a 5 or 6 month process, maybe longer. So that's with bank-owned. That's when the property's already been taken back by the bank.
You can negotiate the price with the
You
bank?
can. Oh yeah, you can go back. You can say, they can list it for 180, and you can have the inspection and all that, and say, I think it's worth 170 or 165. Doesn't say they're going to accept it, but excuse me, that would be the same with any seller, whether it's a bank or an individual. It's going to be the same process. So yeah, the process is the same.
And short sales.
Short sales are, I'm so sorry, I'm using you as an example. I'll use me.
No, you can use it as an example.
So let's say you guys own a house and you can't afford to make the mortgage payments anymore. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
So what I would suggest for anybody out there, get on the phone with the bank right away. There are programs to help offset those costs and try to help you kind of get back on your feet. Life happens to all of us, you know. Don't be ashamed, and don't bury your head in the sand. It does not go away. The mortgage payment doesn't go away if you don't call them or you don't respond to their calls. It just snowballs and gets worse. So the first month you can't pay, call. They can get you on a system and really help alleviate that pressure and that burden, and they'll try to work with you. If that doesn't work out and you need to go into short sale, let's say you're in a situation right now and you need to go into short sale, you've already haven't paid for 4 or 5 months, call the bank. And what you do is you work out a price with the bank, and they, you know, whatever principal you owe on they try to get as close to that as possible. So that way you don't have to go to foreclosure. So let's say you bought a house for $200,000 and you've paid it down and you owe them $189. You've had it for 4 years or something, and you owe them $189, which would probably be less because whatever, it's always interest for us. But whatever. So let's say you owe them $189. You would go to the bank and say, listen, I can no longer afford to pay this. I don't want you to foreclose. And you kind of work out a deal where then you go, it's still a traditional listing, and you go and list the property, but the bank has to approve it. You don't have the final say. So you work with the bank, but you don't have the final say on what the bank says, hey, okay, we'll accept that. And how that benefits the owner is, it's not as much of a hit on your credit. So if you lose a house to foreclosure and it's, you owed $189,000 and only fetches $70,000 on an auction, now you owe that bank $119,000. Whereas if you're able to go into short sale and maybe sell it for $150,000, now on your credit report it shows you have a balance of $39,000. And for all of these things, and for the advantage of a buyer, unfortunately, people have to buy that property. Someone else's unfortunate situation, but people will buy it, and that's what we want. You can save money on the buying end, obviously, because you can usually get it at a reduced rate because they need to kind of liquidate and get out of that property. I will say for anybody who's in that situation where they are falling behind, do contact your bank, but also contact a tax professional to find out what taxes you might owe for that money if bankruptcy or whatever. And again, that's not my area, but definitely reach out to the appropriate professionals to make sure that you're protected and things of that nature. So
good advice.
And do people transfer like titles to people? Do they have a system for that too?
Meaning,
like if you wanted to take over someone's house.
So if you wanted to take over someone's mortgage payments, that's a bank thing. So that would be up to the bank. It depends if it's transferable, and I'm not really sure about that, to be 100% honest with you. So I wouldn't want to answer that question, but I'm assuming that would be something you'd have to go through the bank and go through that process with the bank. So.
Okay.
And if you own it outright, then you can sell the house for $1 or for nothing and gift it to someone. So that's different. But when the money's involved, I would say reach out to.
You still have to get qualified.
Exactly, because the bank wants to make sure you're going to be able to, you're going to be able to pay it for sure.
Anything else? Do you have any other questions?
No, I think you covered it. You asked all my questions already.
So anything else you want to let us know about?
So, like I said, the biggest thing for me is, buy something. If you are able to buy something, buy something. If you're not, or if you don't feel like you are, call somebody. Anytime someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to buy a house, I post on Instagram and Facebook and things like that, and you get the people, and I'm like, I always say, call a lender. It all starts there. It all starts with contacting a lender, because the lender will say, hey, you know what? No, you're not ready now. But if you do X, Y, and Z in 9 months, in a year, in 2 years, you'll be ready. And the worst thing to do is look at yourself and say, I'm probably not ready now. And then wait a year. And then what? Then start the 2-year process. Start now. If you're 21, if you're 41, if you're 71, whatever the case may be, and you want want to change, you want to invest, reach out to a realtor, me.
That's right. There you go.
And let us, connect you with some lenders and start the process so you can, just build that equity,
Tell us about the properties in New Bedford. Since you're in you're in New Bedford, you're not in Rhode Island yet, are you?
Not in Rhode Island.
Right,
so New Bedford, Fall River, Dartmouth, Westport. Those are all areas I'm pretty familiar with.
Tell us about those areas, the average prices of a house. Tell us about the multi-units.
So there's a lot of multifamilies in New Bedford. What's happening now is it's more of a seller's. So here in this area, it's buyer. It's slightly leaning towards buyer, and I just did some brief research, yesterday and today about the area, just because I don't work this area. So it swings a little towards the buyer, but not heavy. It's not like it's totally for the buyer, but it's a little different here.
It's expensive here.
It's
very expensive.
Exactly. And people, I think, there's more properties available here, so it doesn't. It makes it more to the advantage of a buyer, whereas, New Bedford.
Here in Cape.
Yes.
Is more.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So whereas New Bedford, and maybe not more units, but in terms of where people are looking and people are selling. Okay. Whereas, New Bedford, Fall River, there's so many people looking to invest, and there's just no inventory. So, you can go get a 3-family. I remember probably maybe 8 years ago, you used to be able to get a 3-family for like $220, $230. Yeah. Now they're in the threes. Yeah. I mean, that quickly, within 5, 6, 7 years, the prices have really gone through the roof. It's because we're getting the train. Everybody's super excited about that. I'm super excited about it as well. So the prices are going through the roof, and that's why for me personally in my area, everybody that I can get my hands on and get the air for 5 minutes, I'm like, buy something, please. Buy it now, because if you think the prices are going to drop, there's no sign of things slowing down. They're leveling off, but they're not dropping. Yeah. Prices aren't dropping. Like I said, they'll level off a little bit, especially with the fall, holidays coming. Right. But prices aren't going to drop. So people waiting for that, like, oh, the prices are going to go back to what they were 5 years ago. They're not.
Where's the train in New Bedford, or going from? Where is it going from?
New Bedford. So there'll be an actual station in New Bedford, and I want to say I think there's Lakeville and Middleborough. So I think they're tying into that rail that's already existing. So it'll probably, I'm assuming it'll run through Lakeville and Middleborough still, but there'll be an actual station in New Bedford. So I'm super excited.
Going to Boston.
Going to Boston.
Yep.
Oh, that's what I wanted to know.
Oh, okay. Yep. It'll be going to Boston.
Wow.
Right.
That's a big deal.
It is. It's a big deal. I think it's great for the city, and so I just think people need to buy real estate now.
And Fall River. Tell us about Fall River.
So Fall River is kind of similar to New Bedford. It doesn't have, I know that they had those two. I don't know if you know, they had those 2 huge cooling towers that they blew up. I don't know, a year ago, or not even a year. I think it was in the spring. So there are these 2 cooling towers that I remember watching, the towers being put together, and they actually imploded them. I want to say May or June. I'm not really sure 100% on the timeline, but it was recently. And I know they're doing a commercial / residential kind of build over there. So that's going to be great. It's going to create some jobs for the city of Fall River. So there are some things going on in Fall River. They have a bunch of dispensaries out there. Yeah. So, and that, hey, that brings business, that brings money to the city. And the value of the homes has definitely increased in Fall River as well, for sure. And they're similar to New Bedford pricing in terms of 3 families. It might be a little more expensive, a little pricier. New Bedford's not quite there yet, but it's climbing. So.
All right. So.
Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions. I think you answered all my questions.
That was good information.
What was that?
I said that was good information.
Yeah, no problem. I love it. I love what I do.
So we need to get a
lender.
A lender on here.
For sure. So as soon as you guys are ready, and that's a really great piece, and that's an important piece, because, that's the biggest what if for people. Well, can I afford it? And is my credit good enough? And there's just a lot of, I explained to Angel, there's so many different variables and questions that go into that. So it's really hard for me to answer it. I mean, it's not hard, but I don't like to give misinformation. And so I give high level stuff that I know, but lenders just have access to so many products. I mean, there's constantly new things coming out. New things passing. I know just with FHA, they used to not do condos, and now they do. So there's always things changing. Nice. And so it's great with a lender, because they can really help the consumer and get more people buying, because that's ideally, people need to own where they live.
So you need to buy, and the person to see is ASHANTI Miranda in New Bedford, Fall River, Dartmouth,
Westport, Marion, Mattapoisett, all my stomping grounds.
All our stomping ground. She's from the area, so she's gonna treat you right.
Absolutely.
You know, so they said it's called. Somebody said it's called the Working Poor. So make sure that's what we say. This show is very informative. It's a great topic, discussion. So,
Yeah, Rashida said,
Rashida?
3 years since I purchased my first home. Best decision I've made. There are no rent caps in the state of Massachusetts. Prices are on the rise.
Yep.
There are so many great programs out there.
Awesome. I love that. So it's working for people, and I love to see people doing it. And like I said, you know, I had mentioned this before. If you don't feel that, if you financially you can't qualify, partner with someone.
Yeah.
Absolutely
That's
partner
a
with
great
someone.
idea.
I
That's
mean,
the best.
and I always say this to people, and the more people I can get in front of, the better. Partner with, don't wait, partner with someone and buy that 3-family, live on one floor, have your partner live on the other floor, rent out the third floor. You're going to save money, and then eventually, you'll have that equity, and you guys can buy something else.
Do you have to live on the property?
So for FHA, for the 203K, you want to do the owner occupied, and honestly, it's worth it. I think it's 2 years. So if you really want to move in 2 years, then knock yourself out.
Okay.
But the lenders that I work with one lender who does. He's also a contractor, so he's well versed in that and the construction component of it. So I work with a lot of great lenders that know a lot. And that can really help the buyer or the consumer in terms of locating that property and knowing what it's going to cost to fix it. And so I am all about 3 families. If you can get into a 3-family, that you figure if you buy a 3-family for $300,000 or $320,000, let's say your mortgage is say $2,100 or $2,200, but you have 3 units at $1,300 a piece. That's $3,600. Maybe a little more, maybe about $2,600 or $2,700. But even if you live in 2 and your mortgage is $2,600 or $2,700, and you rent out a 3-bedroom for $1,200, that knocks you down to what, $1,400. So now you guys are each spending $700 in a 3-bedroom apartment. You're not getting that. So now you're saving money.
Because that counts, and when you get the house, that counts as
it counts as income.
Yeah,
so
income.
So let's say again, so it's a 3-family. And you're on the first floor, it's just a couple, you live on the first floor and then you rent out second and third. They count up to 75% of that rental income. So if you can rent out each floor for $1,000, that's $2,000, and they're gonna count, $1,500 of that as actual income towards towards what you can afford. So you might be able to afford, say, $200,000, well maybe you can afford $250,000 if you have 2 units that are rentable units. So that can also help you get into purchasing something that you might not be able to afford. It's awesome. There's a lot of great programs, and that's why I say don't be afraid of it, because the worst case scenario is that you meet with a lender and they say, hey, you're not in a position to buy, but do X, Y, and Z. They're going to tell you exactly what to do, and you'd be surprised exactly how many people. First of all, it's shocking how many people actually do qualify. Like I said, my son's 19. My sons are 19 and 21 and buying their first house. You can do it. It might take time, but it's doable. And you just got to be dedicated and kind of follow the directives.
You should start young.
And I think you should. What portion of your income should you put towards your house? So say if
you mean getting ready,
or if you're at the house,
get a down payment.
Should I make sure I have 25%
You want
of my income?
the sweet spot is it shouldn't be more than 30% of your income. That's the sweet spot, 30%. And the reason I say that is because that's what landlords look for. Landlords want you to make 3 times. So let's say if it's $1,000 a month unit, they want you to make $36,000 a year. So that's the sweet spot, about 30% of your income.
That's what I was asking earlier. And I got a chance.
So that's where you want to be. When you're looking at your finances, you want to say, okay, this is what I make every year. This is what I'd like my mortgage to be, because sometimes you can qualify. I had a woman I worked with. She qualified for like $250,000. She ended up buying a little modular home, super, super cute. She paid like $90,000. She could have bought a way bigger house, but she said, you know what? I don't want my quality of life to change. So just because you qualify for something doesn't mean you need to utilize all that. If you qualify for $300,000, but we can find a 3-family for $200,000 that needs $50,000 in work, then let's get that. And let's be $50,000 less than what you qualify for to kind of drive that payment down. So
your quality of life still have to be great. I still want to take my trips.
Right, you still want to, you
don't want to be killing yourself to pay.
Do you really want to work, work your butt off and then, not even be able to go enjoy a dinner? No, to me, that's not enjoyable. I'd rather live in something smaller, modest, affordable, so I can still go out to dinner or, like you said, take a trip or go watch a movie. You don't want to be pinching pennies and, not even be able to treat yourself to McDonald's.
I know you probably mentioned down payment, but
She did.
What if you only have 8,000, 10,000?
So there's a few things. If you have great credit, there are programs that this one woman, it's this lender I work with, he was working with this woman. She made great money, but she had 3 kids and she was a single mother. So she could afford it, but she couldn't save.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are in that situation. It's like, listen, I can afford. Yes, I can pay. You know, I'm paying $1,400 a month rent. I can pay $16 for my own place. I'll do it.
Yeah.
But it's like I can't get up. You know, I can't with all my bills and my children or whatever. I can't save $15,000. That's the sticking point. With good credit, there are products out there that you don't have to make a down payment.
Right.
You can just focus on closing costs. Also with closing costs, especially let's say in a market like this where it's kind of swings in favor of the buyer, you can build the closing costs into the loan.
Yeah.
So, and you're talking pennies. So maybe not pennies, dollars. So let's say if you're buying a $200,000 house, you want to plan on 3 to 5% for closing costs. Some lenders play it really safe and go with 6. I'm working with a guy now. His lender wants us to have 6%, but let's say 3 to 5%. So let's say you need $10,000 in closing costs for a $200,000 house. We can say, okay, let's say we want to pay full asking. We'll pay $210, but I want $10,000 kicked back to the buyer in closing costs.
Yeah.
That's how you word it. So there are ways to avoid it.
Yeah.
It's trickier in seller markets because they want more skin in the game, and it's just that they want an easier, quicker close. But in an area where it's more favorable towards the buyer, you can definitely you can build that right into. I have, like I said, the gentleman I'm working with now, we've built all of his closing costs at 6% of the purchase price. So I think it was like $11,000. We built that right into the price acquisition. So it cost him 3.5% more down payment. So I think it's another $300 down payment, but that's a lot better than $11,000 at the closing table. So you can build it in. So if anybody that down payment is an issue or closing costs, there are ways to work around that. But you gotta have something. So maybe you don't have the greatest credit, but you can save money, or maybe you have great credit, but you can't save money. So you want to have one thing that you're working with. But even if nothing is working for you right now, meet with someone
And they
and
can
figure
tell
out
you.
how to
Get a
and they'll tell
plan
you
going.
get a plan going. And if you stick to the plan, it works. Again, I have young people buying property. I have the woman that bought the modular home, her first purchase at 56 years old, and good for her. So it's never too late, it's never too early, and it's never impossible. She made it happen. She never had the credit to do it, and at 50 years old, her son passed away, and she decided to redirect her life. And 6 years, worked on everything, saved up her money, got a second job, and bought a house.
So can you tell them, everyone, where can they get in touch with you?
So I am on Facebook, ASHANTI Miranda. My website is down right now because we're at Keller Williams. We're switching over to a new platform, so everybody kind of just laid off their website. But my phone number, you can text me, you can message me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, Ashanti Sells MA, and my phone number, we can add it. Or
we'll add it on.
Add my phone number. Text me, call me. I'm a 24-hour agent. I shouldn't say that. My boyfriend's gonna kill me. But I am, I answer calls and messages 24/7. I do. I love it. I truly love what I do. I love helping people. I like working with sellers. I love working with investors, but I love first-time home buyers. It's just fun. The guy, we just got an accepted offer today, and he called me a couple of times. He's like, I never call you. And I was like, I know. And he's super excited, and we have his inspection set up. So I love what I do. I love helping people find homes. I love helping people find apartments. I just love, seeing people happy and finding the things that they need.
Since you said inspections, tell us about it. We're not done yet.
Oh, you didn't ask them?
An
appraisal.
And appraisals,
yes.
please.
So an appraisal is done by the bank. So a bank will send an appraiser out, and that's just to say, okay, I'm glad that you want to spend $200,000 on this house, but does the bank want to spend $200,000?
Yes.
They need to make sure that the house is worth what we are offering to pay for it. So you don't want to sit there and say, again, I'll pay $200,000 because it's your dream home and you love, green walls and red carpet. Awesome. But is it worth it for the bank? Because again, the bank is always looking out for themselves. And if you default on that, can they sell it for what you're paying for it? That's the appraisal. Inspection is more protection for the buyer. Again, not mandatory. but I always do a hold harmless. If someone is adamant about not getting an actual inspection, it's fine, but don't blame me, because my personal professional advice is get an inspection, because an inspector is going to go in and look at all the unseens. So I can look at, you know, the room that we're in, and I can say the wall is gray and the floor is wood, and that's fine. But what about the underlying issues? You know, am I going to climb on the roof? No. Are you going to climb on the roof? No. The inspector's going to get up there and he's going to look on the roof. He's going to look at the wire, check for termites. The house, we had termites and we had to have that remediated. So the inspector's going to look at all that and make sure that you are making it a good purchase and making sure the structural things. You know, again, I always caution buyers, like, you know, we're not going to nitpick if, you know, the handle on the drawer is loose. We can tighten that up with a screwdriver. I'm not going to say I want $5 off. But bigger issues, you know, it leaves you room to negotiate price. Unless it's an as-is property, typically it's like, hey, it is it's as-is, but then that leaves you a way out. Because again, it might be as-is, and I might say, okay, I can see that the roof is falling off, and I can see that the windows are all broken, but I didn't see there were termites, and that's a no-go for me. So that inspection is a way out for you, and it's a way to make sure that you're making a good investment. So it's definitely super, super important. Attorneys too, like I said, attorneys. I'm big on buyer attorneys. You don't have to have one, but the attorney that is actually represented by you, you can build that into your closing costs, and they protect you. They protect your purchase. So
makes sense. I want to thank you for coming down. We got a
Randy
lot of information today.
Randy said her info.
You said what?
Randy wants her info.
She said it already.
Yeah, and you can throw my my cell phone on there on the link or whatever.
When we edit the stuff, we will put everything on. This is the live. We don't add anything on to that, but we probably will anyway.
Yep.
But we have a main tape. Thank you so much.
It was great. It was great meeting you. I'm looking forward to coming back.
So lenders are coming back soon. Thank you. This is The Drop, Mellow Yellow, and real estate agent, ASHANTI.
Bye. Thank
Miranda.
you.
Thank you. Peace.